Alright, so the next deck is the Power Thought cards, and these are a little different than a lot of my other cards. They have like a short phrase on the front, and then they'll actually have a longer explanation on the back, and that's it. They don't actually come with a book, and I actually do find these are really good for like affirmations. So you can kind of see they look like this, but I really love the art, and I actually find these are really good for manifesting what I want, because they like I said, they're affirmations, and I think they're just really pretty, and they're light and sweet, and they are actually really empowering. So I find these are really nice. If you're looking for like a nice deck just to put on a coffee table, or maybe you're not so much into energy work, or just like stepping into it, and you want something that's just gentle that you could give to a friend that's maybe, you know, religious, or like not, you know, really into the whole like, you know, universe spirit being, but you just like cards that are just loving and affirm positivity. This is a really great deck for that. And I do like to put this on my altar occasionally, just for a little, you know, like pick-me-up. So it's really cute. Now, this next deck is actually a Doreen Virtue deck, which I really don't usually get drawn to Doreen Virtue decks. I'm not really a fan of the flower fairy thing she has going on, and the angel decks are just not something I really connect with. But I'll tell you guys, these oracle cards are one of my favorite decks, which is kind of ironic. I picked this up in Australia because we had this deck out in the shop, and whenever I'd pull cards, it was just so on point that I like couldn't not buy it. The back of the cards aren't my favorite, again, because there's a fairy here, and I don't really actually think that is a really good representation of the cards themselves, because there's actually no fairies in this deck. I think Doreen Virtue just likes her fairies, and so she's like, I need a fairy somewhere. So these are actually based off of flowers, and there is this like short phrase down here at the bottom, and then, like, you know, some keyword kind of things here. But what I would do is, after a reading, I would pull like 5 to 10 of these cards out just intuitively, and I would have my client read them, and just, I would say, you know, this is what I'm feeling for you. And it was a really great way to let me see if I can get this clear for you guys. It was a really great way to end the reading in a real positive sort of way, and I just always found these were beautiful to look at. They were really empowering, and they're a very gentle but clear message, and I just really enjoyed these. And so even though I'm not really into Doreen Virtue, I would recommend this deck for, you know, putting out on a coffee table, or just if you need to pick me up in the morning. You know, this is one of those, like, you know, pull one card in the morning kind of a deck. So it's really lovely. It does come with this book, but I'm not gonna lie, I have like looked at it once. Like, that's it. And they do come with like a little more, but honestly, the affirmations or like the suggestions on the card are enough for me. I didn't feel like I needed this for me to really understand it. But there's almost 100 pages in this book, so if you do like the books, it is a nice little book. I just don't personally use it. But these cards are just like absolutely lovely, and I would recommend them to anyone, even someone who's not into Doreen Virtue decks. I believe this deck is worth looking at. Alright, this next deck is the Gaia Oracle by Tony Carmine Salerno, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is probably his most famous deck. He produces a lot of decks, but I'm going to say this is probably his most well-known, and these are upside down. No, they're not. Okay. I love the Gaia Oracle. It is one of my favorite oracle decks. I love bringing it to my meditation groups, and along with my other Tony Carmine Salerno deck, which is the Universal Love Oracle. But whereas that's more specifically about love, this has a bigger range of topics. I love Tony Carmine Salerno decks. They are definitely a lot less like intense than, say, like an Alana Fairchild deck, and when it came right down to it, I would choose an Alana Fairchild deck over a Tony Carmine Salerno deck. But these are beautiful when you just want a beautiful reading to tap into the energy, really step into self-love, step into an earthy space. These are really great, and that's why I like using them for my, you know, meditation group. And I do love the art. It is stunning, and yeah, I just think it's really beautiful and naturey. The only thing I don't like about Tony Carmine Salerno decks is that he does tend to reuse his art in other decks. So you might get a deck and a couple of the pictures might be the same, and I don't really like that. I like when the decks are new and fresh. So that's my only like thing. So when it comes to Tony Carmine Salerno decks, you can just get one or two, and it's definitely enough. Like, I don't feel like with the Alana Fairchild decks that they're unique enough to get all of them, but I definitely love having a few and just really soaking up the beautiful essence of these decks. The book that goes along with this is a little smaller, but it is just lovely. Actually, it's about 80 pages. So you can see, like, you get about like this much information on each card, and the meanings are just lovely. The thing, and then there's an affirmation. This is a really, really beautiful oracle deck. It's a great one for people starting off. It's almost like, I would say it's like, you know, beginner to intermediate. Like, I, you know, use a lot of oracle decks, and there's a lot of oracle decks I don't use really as much anymore because they just don't, they're simple. They're not as hard hitting as I like, but I still genuinely use this and the Universal Love Oracle. So I really still use this deck a lot. So I definitely suggest it. So even if you have been, you know, doing a lot of card work, this is still a beautiful deck to work with. So I highly recommend this, and it's a great gift. I've gifted this deck to many people in the past, and it's always been really awesome. All right, so the next deck is the Divine Circus Oracle, and I just posted a review of this deck, so I don't really need to go too far into it. But this is one of my current favorite oracle decks right now. Not specifically for the art. I don't really feel like the art is super necessary for this, the messages that come through this deck. The art itself is beautiful, but I'm just not super connected to the circus theme, but the art is lovely. If you don't like clowns, this is definitely not a deck for you because there's a whole heck of a lot of clowns. They're not like creepy clowns, or at least I don't think they are. They're a little more like vintagey, and so that doesn't really bother me. Clowns, you know, they're not my favorite, but I'm not like freaked out by them. But really what this deck is, what the best part about this deck is the book. And this is by Alana Fairchild. And this, I think, is one of her best decks so far. And I love Alana Fairchild decks. And so when I say this is one of her best decks, that's saying something. The card meanings are, yeah, usually about a page and a half, and then she'll have a healing, as it says, healing trick, and then there's an affirmation. This deck is so oddly on point. I use this for every reading I do, well, since I've gotten this deck several months ago. And it's just amazing. Like, I couldn't recommend this deck more, unless you do not like clowns, and then I would not recommend this deck. But for anyone who can get past that, I would highly recommend that deck. 10 out of 10. It is amazing. The next deck is the Goddess Guidance Oracle cards, and this was one of the first decks I got as well. And this Oracle deck is all goddesses, and so they have the goddess here and a keyword, and then they're like a little phrase down here, and these are really good. I've actually started to appreciate these more recently. I did in my last tarot scopes, I pulled one of these for each of the signs, and I really thought it was kind of a cool energy to bring in for spring. If you want to connect to goddesses, I think this is a really good deck. I also have another goddess deck, which is pretty intense. I have a lot of goddess decks, but I have ones that are more like, you know, I have the Kuan Yin Oracle, I have the Lady Isis Oracle, but I mean goddess decks where, you know, there's many goddesses in it. This one is a little more simple, whereas the other goddess deck I have is definitely a lot more intense. I forget, it's by Stacy DeMarco. And so there's like whole, you know, pages on each goddess. And so those are a little more intense. If you want something a little more gentle or just simple, or you just want to tap into a certain goddess energy really quickly, I would definitely suggest this deck. Again, this is a good deck for beginners, in my opinion. And the art is lovely. The borders don't really do it for me, but it's the energy and the words that really I find that are more important in this case. It does come along with a little book. I don't really use the book a lot just because I think the cards are fine by themselves, but it's around 100 pages, and so they do definitely have a bit of information on each goddess. So what they have is a message from the goddess, and then it's various meanings of this card, and then about the goddess. So it does have some really cool information, and if you want to learn more about goddesses, or you even want to see, you know, maybe what goddess you want to tap into for the year or just in general, this might be a really good beginner book or deck to just see what comes up, see what goddess, you know, piques your interest, and you know, maybe go from there. So I think this would be a really good deck if you're trying to get into goddess energy, to you know, just to tap into that and see who comes forward for you. All right, so this next deck has a very special place in my heart because I did buy this in Australia, and this is called the Dreamtime Reading Cards, and this deck is all about the dream time for the Aboriginal people in Australia. So this is connect with the ancient spirit and nature of Australia. So I very much feel that Australia is like my motherland. Like, it feels so much better to me than being here in the States. Just the earth, just the energy, the whole vibe of the place. So when I do spirit work, I will you know, I'll call to my guides and call them in, but I will also call to the you know, spirits of the land of Australia, because I really feel very safe and cradled there. And so when I use this deck, I really have this kind of longing for home on some level, and I just adore the Aboriginal indigenous paintings, and it's just a really unique energy. And I really like this book because it was actually written by a woman who is indigenous to Australia, and she really put a lot of really beautiful anecdotes from her life in it, and how these things really, you know, in her life specifically, meant very sacred things to her. So it's really cool to have an indigenous person's take on, you know, these energies. So the book is rather big. It's about 94 pages, and it has beautiful full-size reproductions of each card, and I think it's one page of meaning, yeah. So yeah, it's a really lovely book, and if you again want to tap into the energy of Australia or that indigenous energy, this is definitely a great deck. I think she did do the paintings as well. I believe she did the paintings and she did the meanings. So that's a really cool, you know, combination there. And it is really from that, actually from, you know, that indigenous spirit, like directly from that. So I think that's a really beautiful part of my collection, and I do really like tapping into it when I can. Alright, the next deck is the Gaia Oracle, and anyone who has been on my channel for a little while and follows my you know, card collection videos, you know, when I'm, you know, what decks I'm using, you guys I'm sure will recognize this deck. And this deck is about the energy of the galactic language of light, and this is by this is actually not by Jose Aguilas, but he is the man who went to the Mayan temples and actually downloaded all of this information about the synchronicity and the galactic energy that we all come through to be on the planet. And these cards are just so accurate, and there is a whole like calendar, and the Mayan calendar, and all of these different signs, and you're born into different vibrations and tones, and it's an extremely complicated system. Jose wrote many books, and so this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I have, you know, slowly been studying these But this deck is just an amazing deck. I love pulling this. I don't pull these cards very often, but I'll pull them on special occasions. So my birthday, on New Year's, when there's a huge transition in my life, I will use these cards. The book that comes along with this is like a legitimate like book. Like it's like full on. It talks about each of the, you know, the signs. It goes into it, and there's so much in this book. And this, like I said, this is again just the tip of the iceberg. And so like I find it very difficult to actually explain this deck. All I say is it's worth having if you want to start working on the synchronicity and like why you're here on the planet and things like that. This deck is very special to me because my ex-boyfriend Peter actually bought it for me for my birthday when we were together, and I started using it, and it's really just been very special because he was actually the one who brought in the energy of the Mayan energy into my life, and it's been a really amazing journey. So that deck has a special place in my heart, and I am so thankful that he shared that information with me. Alright, the next deck is the Spirit Messages Daily Guidance Oracle deck by John Holland. And this is a deck I don't really use very often. I've thought about gifting it at some point. I probably will. But it is a really lovely deck. It's definitely a good deck for a beginner. It has, you know, this short explanation here, and then there is a book that goes along with it. And when I was using this deck more regularly, it was an amazing deck. And it still is. Like, when I do pull a card from this, it's always really on point. But like I said, I tend to go for meatier decks now, and so this deck just isn't as full-bodied as I'd like. So, but that's not to say that it's not an amazing deck. The cardstock is really lovely. It's a great beginner deck. You know, if you're really just trying to step into your intuition, really step into your soul path, I definitely suggest this deck. You know, just, you know, to pull a card in the morning or whatever, or in the evening. I will bring this deck also to my meditation group, and it's really good. You know, it's not delving so deep. It just, you know, it kind of taps you into a certain energy. So, and I do like the art. It's very abstract and kind of different. So I do like that a lot. The book is actually rather meaty. I think it has about 100 pages, and as you can see, that's about the information you get here, and the information in this deck is really beautiful. I remember it being really on point, and I have suggested this deck to several people, so it's not to say that this isn't an awesome deck. I just don't really use it anymore because it's not really where I'm working or what I'm working on personally, but it's definitely a lovely deck, and I would suggest it, like I said, to beginners because it's awesome. This next deck is one of my newer decks, and this is the Mudras for Awakening the Energy Body Oracle deck. And so this is all about mudras and the energy they pull into your body. So there is a book that goes along with this, but it explains the mudra, and it has this chakra that it goes along with. And then it describes what the mudra does, for the benefits, the instructions, and, you know, like an affirmation. So mudras are a way of placing the hands that direct the energy in a certain way, and they're great for meditation. So I really love this deck. My mother got it for me for Christmas, and I just love looking at it. It's really beautiful, and there's several mudras in here that I will use regularly while I'm doing my meditation practice. And so, oh, and then they do have each of the chakras in here as well. So they have all the mudras, and then they have a card for each of the chakras. So I just love how beautiful this is, and I love the mandalas behind the hands. I will say the pictures of these are a little confusing, so it is important to go to the back and like be like, how does it work? Because sometimes the image is reversed, and so like it's hard to see like which way it's, you know, where your body's actually supposed to be. So it's important to look to see. I love this one. Yeah, look to see where your hands are supposed to be placed. This is my other favorite one. Anyone who knows I do vagina paintings is probably not surprised. This is the book that does go along with it. It is you know, it's a very thorough book, and there is a practice here for each thing. So it goes into the hand, you know, the mudras a bit more, but I've actually found that the cards are pretty good on their own. But if you do want to delve into it a little more, there is this book, and it is lovely. As you can see, it's very colorful. It's very visually attractive. So that's really lovely. So yeah, if you're wanting to get into mudras or meditation, and you're not really sure where to begin, I think this deck is a really great starting off point. And I have found it to be really good for, like, you know, creating a more stable practice.